gone from the IBMC, it was felt every Sunday, especially the first Saturday of each month. I was just thinking about, oh, I'm missing my sittings, and I wonder how they're doing. But I was in the land where it all began, and as the experiences of a modern day pilgrim, that's what I would like to, share with you today. I had read several books on ancient pilgrims who had gone to India to walk on the path of the Buddha himself, and so many of them have actually lost their lives. Now, granted that was centuries ago, even to this day, when you say to someone, oh, I'm going to India, they kind of like, ooh, are you going to get sick? Or, what are you going to take? Are you going to take any antibiotics? This and that, and this and that. So I cannot not, describe that. There was a part of me that was even considering those possibilities. And so I had a whole bag of medicines and supplements and, vitamins and antibiotics and even some, icy hot patches, just in case. From long sittings, because it was not the touristy type of trip that I wanted to do, going to this part of the world, especially after having wanted to do this pilgrimage for over 20 years. And I was excited to do this from years ago when I first met Bhante Ratnasara across the street. I probably mentioned this many times, but when I first saw him, he inspired me to really jump into this path properly. And from that point on, I was highly impressed by the lifestyle of a monastic, of a Buddhist monk, and the robes that they wear. The kesa is, to me, it's really out of this world. It's so humbling. And as a layperson, even as a Dhamma teacher, I am always first in tremendous gratitude and appreciation and just respect, in seeing a monastic and seeing a monk taking 227 precepts. We take 5, and sometimes we're just like, it's tough. 227, it's impressive. And this is very it falls in line with some of my experiences I've had going to the various sites. Where to begin? The experience that one has going to India, let's say, also Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, which is in Nepal, modern-day Nepal, you get to see a lot of locals. And as a Westerner, going to many of these sites, it's not the same, for example, the mindset of the local, especially those people who are seeing you as a Westerner coming over. They will look at you as an opportunity to maybe make some, get some money from you, etc. And there's some other people who are genuinely interested to chat with you, to test or train themselves or practice their English. Some of the slangs they might have heard or seen on YouTube or videos or whatever, they want to see if they hold true or if you can actually understand them. So it's very interesting, and you engage in a conversation with them. But there's another group of individuals that one inevitably comes across, and those are the ones who, this was at least my experience anyhow, who are wearing the robes. For all intents and purposes, they are monks, at least for an outsider. And then you see the bowl they have. And then you see how some of them approach you asking for money. So to me, this was shocking, because that has never been, over like a quarter century that I've been in this path. I've never ever experienced a Buddhist monk approaching me with a bowl or even asking me for money, because you never see anywhere in the Nikayas where the monks are begging. They're listed as the highest of the echelon. There's the monks, there's the nuns, there's the laity. They're at the highest level of the Buddhist Sangha, in a sense. Why are they begging again? So now, thankfully, my understanding and exposure to Buddhist monks here has helped me to get a better grasp. So, but this did not, I cannot hide from you the sense of this, this sense of, I guess the word that comes up is possibly disgust, but it's too strong of a word. But I just felt like, this is a sacred place. This is where the Buddha walked. This is where the Buddha taught. Let's say in the case of Tibetan Monastery, where he spent 24 vasas, 3-month retreats at the monastery that you see in most of the Nikayas. So many suttas were actually recited there, taught to people there. So this is a sacred place, and after all, that's where the fragrant chamber of the Buddha is. Where the Buddha's own hut was. So over the centuries, 26 centuries have passed. So archaeologists have built on top of that, keeping the same outline, basically. So the structure is there, in a sense. So you're right on top of that area, but it's covered up with bricks that over the centuries, anything from the Emperor Asoka's time, so he delineated, he put his own symbols, etc. The columns that he has, Asokan pillars they call them. So you have all these designators, and so it's such a beautiful place. Plus you already have your own self. When you're walking in, it's a totally powerful place. And each one of the 4 major places that you visit leaves or has left in the air, in the ground, in the soil, in the plants, in the trees, a sense of a very unique, what's the word I'm looking for? As you can tell, the words are escaping me, because I'm thinking about, for example, when we went to Varanasi, Benares, where Sarnath is, where the Buddha gave the first sermon, Dhamma Sutta, where he actually turned the wheel of Dhamma for the first time, where he taught the 4 Noble Truths. I had just landed after a long journey from Nepal to Delhi, and from Delhi to Varanasi. I landed, and then the taxi driver I got, he took me through these streets, and there was construction, and I'm like, is this where the Buddha taught? There's like construction, there's concrete, there's this, there's that, there's noise. Oh, so much noise. And I was so exhausted, and I just dozed off. I just laid my seat down, and I just like slept for a little bit, because I asked the guy, and then he said, it's going to be about 2 hours drive. I said, okay. So all of a sudden, the bumpiness of the ride did not wake me up, but something woke me up, and I just lifted my head, and I looked over, and by the way, it had gone already, like an hour and a half had already passed. And I looked towards my right, and I could see the top of the Sarnath Stupa over the canopy of trees through the car's window. And I could see the Buddhist flags before them. And I was just like, oh boy, I actually made it. I'm here. I am here. And this is the place where the 5 bhikkhus actually were there and receiving and listening to the Dhamma for the first time ever. And there was this sense of grandeur. There was this sense of splendid silence. There was a sense of austere nobility in the air. I mean, everything was the grass was beautifully cut, you know, and everything was so serene. And then you see all these, you know, tourist guides and things like that. Oh, do you want an interpreter? They're all over the place, especially when they see you as a Westerner. Everybody wants to buy, you know, have you buy something from them, this and that. And you're just focused. You're honed in on what you are there for, period. And it was just, I was there with a group of other, you know, meditators from different parts of the world, doing different types of meditation. So for me, it was just, I just couldn't believe it. So there was that jubilant side of me that was just like, oh my God, I'm here. You know, and then there's that other side of you that's just like, okay, let's settle down and just take it all in. And as you're in those, as a meditator and teacher of meditation, I couldn't help but to just go there. And yeah, there's parts of you remembering the suttas, and it's like, yeah, this is where he said this. Yeah, this is, you know, the intellectual, academic side of you, just like you need to quiet it down a little bit and just to take it all in and just sit there like a little child who's just had enough of food, had just had his playtime, and now it's time to just settle. And so there was that air, that sense of surprise, that sense of a teaching that is revealed for the very first time. I don't know, you have to conjure up a proper adjective for that to fit your own schema. Now, a few days later, we were in Bodhgaya. And we got there around evening, so the sun was just setting. And I had with me a meditation mosquito tent, which are these cool things, contraptions that it's good for one person, even as big as me. So you can actually open it up and basically to avoid the mosquitoes, because in the evening you will have this whole, you know, multitude of mosquitoes just paying you a visit. And, you know, you'll be eaten alive. You know? But many of the meditators would just sit there or just whatever. So I was sitting there and I had a wish. And I had a wish of, first of all, you can't take any phones into the site, so you have to check that in. So I couldn't take pictures. So I was just like, I'm there, let me absorb it, but there was this higher pitched sense of celebration in the air, in contrast to what I experienced at Sarnath. There was so much more jubilance, there was just so much more like a celebratory feel, and it was unavoidable. I mean, there were even Hindus there. They had just constructed, by the way, Islamic mosque, almost right at the gate of Bodhgaya. Interesting, right? You know, why doesn't it have to be there? This and that. All these ideas came about, especially when the chanting started, right at a very critical time when people were going into deep meditation. So all these ideas were happening, but I could not divorce myself from the serenity of where I was. The sanctity. I know it might sound too mystical to some, but it is there for anyone who physically is present and is just momentarily just putting themselves out and just saying, you know what, let me take this, let me just breathe the environment in. And I had that wish. I knew how rare it was to find a Bodhi leaf on the grounds, even though the Bodhi tree is there, because you have thousands of people coming in and out, and you have, you know, hundreds of people who are just sitting there for hours, waiting for a leaf to fall. And then you have many people who are just meditating. So I had that wish as I was sitting, and I said, I wish I could, it would be lovely if I could get a leaf. It would just be lovely, But I said, I can't be greedy. And that was that. I forgot about it. And we sat, and then they come around when it's near 9 p.m., right before like 8:45, and the guards who are, government guards, so soldiers and, whatever, and they use a whistle. They go around whistling, okay, it's time for you to go. So people start getting their stuff, their meditation, equipment, whatever, pillows, cushions, whatever. So I unzipped myself out of the tent, and the other meditators did too. And as the person in front of me, she was packing up and leaving, I looked down, and there it was, a leaf, a beautiful Bodhi leaf, just waiting for me. And I looked around, and it was like no one was touching it. I said, that's mine apparently. So I picked it up, and it was just amazing, because something else happened at Bodhgaya a few nights later. I think it was the following evening, in the afternoon, in fact. There is this monk, Australian-born monk. He belongs to the Thai tradition, Thai forest tradition. His name is Ajahn Achalo. And I oftentimes find myself listening to his Dhamma talks. I think he's brilliant and very knowledgeable, very respectful, and diligent practitioner. And very humble. Loves to tell stories. Now he has something that has happened to him in one of his talks that he shares with the community of listeners, meditators, in one of his talks. So he says he likes to go to Bodhgaya maybe once or twice a year, I don't know how many times. And one day he's meditating, and he has a thought. He has a thought, and in Buddhist legends, I would say, or just what meditators say, or some of the arahants have mentioned, is that when you go to Bodhgaya, they say that every single leaf on the Bodhi tree, because it's a sacred place, on each of these leaves you find a deva sitting, celebrating. And he mentions, this is something something that you might believe, not believe, take it, with a grain of salt, or just like, yeah, it's cute, whatever. But he believes in it, and experientially. So he's sitting there meditating with his palms open, and he has the wish, yeah, I would like to get a leaf would be nice. At the end of his sitting, he opens his eyes and he looks, and there is a leaf resting in his right palm. And another time, he's sitting there, and there's a particular spot that he describes when you're walking, circumambulating around the Bodhi tree, and where the royal throne is, where they have encapsulated, covered up and fenced this beautiful throne, which marks the spot where the Buddha was enlightened. You can't get in there, but there's this part of the as you turn the corner, because it's very square, very sharp angles. As you turn, you get to see the Bodhi tree and you get to see the throne. So he likes to sit there to meditate. So one day he's meditating and he has the same idea, same thought occurs to him, and he opens his eyes, and now there's another leaf on his left palm. So I'm sitting there, the second night that I was in Bodhgaya, this thought occurred to me. I remembered him and this incident, and I smiled. And I'm sitting in meditation, so this idea comes to me, and I smile, and I open my eyes, and guess who was sitting right there, who's getting to be able, to sit right there on that spot. Ajahn Achalo. Right there. I was like, this can't be happening. It's just, the odds are too great for this to take place. Him being there, that time of the year, I didn't know. The thought occurring to me, my eyes being closed, at that moment, in that moment of singularity, if you would like to call it, and he's there. And I'm like, wow, this is wonderful. This is such a meritorious moment to be happening. And I just couldn't, I knew that if he sat, he was going to go into meditation, so that would be totally unacceptable for me to go and disrupt. I said, this is the moment. So I came out of my seat, I went towards him, and I paid obeisance. As a monk, you always have to be respectful, of course. And I bowed 3 times, and I said, Venerable, by any chance, you're Ajahn Achalo, right? He smiled and he said, yes. And I introduced myself, and I told him what I had just thought of, and he smiled, and it's like, wow, it's a meritorious moment for both of us indeed. And there was another monk, and he was from the States, so without much ado, I just, separated myself from them. They meditated. But that was one of the things that has happened, which was apparently not that unusual when you're in those spaces. Now, as the pilgrimage went on, the total thing was about 21 days, so 3 weeks. Interestingly enough, we were also making stops at crucial points. Now, what happened was, at the time before the Buddha died, the topic came up, and Ananda was asking the Buddha, other traditions have these pilgrimages, this and that. Is there such a thing where people could come and pay homage, this and that, to the Buddha? And the Buddha always discouraged people to worship him in any way, shape, or form. He kind of wanted to shrug it off, and just finally, just as he normally would do when Ananda came in with something, requesting something, he would always, after hearing Ananda's side and logic, he would just say, okay, fine, this is the alternative type of a thing, or this is what I would recommend. So he said there are 4 places that in the future, or even now, if people want to pay respect or homage to me, to the path, they can go to the Tathagata's birthplace, which was Lumbini, to the place where the Buddha taught the Dhamma for the first time, to the place where the Buddha awakened, and then to the place where the Buddha passes away. Obviously, the order of the Buddha enlightenment is second, to Lumbini. So those are the 4 major spots that usually you're supposed to go to as a pilgrim. Now, in addition to those, there are places where significant historical pinches took place, at least as far as the Dhamma is concerned. For example, we went to a place called Gaya City Hill, which is not too far from Bodhgaya, where the Buddha taught the fire sermon. This is right after his awakening, where he had already the 5 bhikkhus turned into arahants, Kondanya, Assaji, all these. And then there was a group of ascetics who wanted to challenge him, and there was 1,000 of them, and they were fire worshipping yogis. And so he met them on top of this cliff, and we went there, and it has this huge boulder kind of hanging from the edge of the cliff. And there's a beautiful dent on the top of this boulder hanging. And one would love to think that that's where the Buddha sat. But I have my own doubts. I went and sat in that place, and I was just really powerful. Immediately it took you into this whoa, this is heavy, this is good. I'd like to sit here for 2 hours or something. That's the kind of feeling I got. And I wasn't the only one who experienced that. But there was this other this beautiful altar that they had constructed on the main portion of the hill. So that's where the Buddha gave the fire sermon, where he taught this 1,000 ascetics who were challenging him that what they were practicing was the best practice ever, because fire is undeniably strong, is powerful, the sun, etc., this and that, so it's the mother of life, things like that. And to this day you find that kind of practice in India and parts of Iran, I think. So the Buddha said, you got it all wrong. There is fire, and it is burning, but it is craving. And that's where the sermon comes in. At the end of his talk, that group of 1,000 ascetics became arahants. 1,000 of them. And that 1,000, group of 1,000, they went down to Uruvela, which is the bamboo grove, which is where we went next. And sitting there, in the park, it's just, you're feeling the energy, you're feeling this, effortless almost. You're being pulled into a meditative state, even when you're in the bus. Even when the tuk-tuks are going by, whizzing by, rickshaws. These were opportunities, because as a modern-day pilgrim from a 21st century, American city, going to this almost otherworldly environment where your senses are being bombarded, assaulted on every level you can imagine, just like smells, sights, both good and bad, by the way. It was a great opportunity for noticing the defilements. Always there. Always. I mean, if any of you have sat down to meditate and seen these ideas, these thoughts, these senses of the feelings that we have of, I like this, I don't like this, or I don't even want to think about that, let me be completely ignorant of this, indifferent to that. You want to come out of the meditation because sometimes it gets so intense. But that's the juiciest part of the meditation, because that's the fertilizer which allows a person to go deeper, understanding, developing the wisdom. Now, what was happening was you were in that state 24/7 while you were on pilgrimage. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity. So what I'm trying to say is it's very well worth, actually, your time and energy to go and experience it yourself, at least once. Because what was remarkable was also, as we move towards Vaishali, Vaishali is where there were the Lichavis, and Ratana Sutta was recited there. So many other events have taken place. Lichavis were the princes of Vaishali region, which was very prosperous, highly educated for that time period in the world, in fact, not just India. Business was booming, intellectuals, this and that. So there was a place which has now a stupa constructed, which marks the spot where years later the Buddha turned to Ananda, said, okay, Ananda, it's time, like within 3 months I'm going to die. So he relinquished his will to continue on living, his life force. So when the Lichavi princes were, heard this, they came over and they said, we're not going to leave you until the moment of your death. We want to be with you. So after they spent some time with him, he said to them, just go. Just leave me, go about your business. You're lay people. Let us do our monk thing. Let me go ahead with my monks and nuns. You stay there. So there's that moment that is captured still in the air, as if when you go to the stupa, and it's called Gesari or Gesarya stupa, and it was unmistakable. The sadness you felt, as if you say goodbye to someone so dear to you, It's almost like a half death. It's in the air. It's lodged in. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is so different. I mean, no one had to tell me this is what happened there, this and that. You would know. And the person who was pretty much like guiding this pilgrimage, he said, just notice the environment outside the bus, the plants, the trees, this and that. And as the bus was going on this highway, and at pretty great speeds, by the way, on the way they drive in India, it's very fun. Trucks, not tuk-tuks or motorcycles, are trying to overtake each other on both lanes, and there's a 2-lane highway. So you have 2 trucks coming at you while you're in a bus, or 2 buses coming at you. And right at that very last moment, one of them decides to, you know what, let me just get in there. Or somebody has to give way. So it's like living on the edge in a sense. Talk about being with your defilements, of even the anusayas, the latent tendencies of fear. It's there. Especially at night when you have these 2 headlights coming at you. Actually 4. So it keeps you on edge in a sense. But again, it's a wonderful opportunity to just practice instead of just waiting for you to go and sit there. And that's why I always try to help meditators to not treat this as the spot for us to go ahead and now officially begin practice. There's no such thing. This is just training in a sense. Because we can extend that to our daily lives. And that's what the Buddha's legacy is all about, to teach us, to become wise, and to apply whatever we come to learn of the path by living it. And this was a living process. This is a living teaching. And as I was noticing the sugarcane fields, or the rice paddies, or the people working on the fields, thrashing the rice grains out of the chaff, and I was just like, wow, I'm walking, I'm driving, I'm as a passenger going through the pages of history, literally. It forces you to have this sense of poetic presence while you're there. And then on top of that, you have the air of sadness as you're approaching Kushinara, which is the place where the Buddha breathed his last. And when I got to Kushinara, it was very interesting because there was this silence. All of a sudden there's this just like dip of energy in a sense, but still it was very serene. And you go there, you go to the main temple where they have the 6.5 meter long Buddha statue, reclining Buddha on his side. And there's just this sense of quietude in the air, not just in the temple. Even when you're in the city, when you're getting into the city limits, you feel it. It's unavoidable. And we were so exhausted. It was a long journey. I just couldn't wait. I just put my stuff in my room and I said, I'm going. And fortunately for us, we were staying at a Tibetan monastery, and so it was right adjacent to the temple. You could pretty much jump over the fence and you were there in the park area where the temple is, over the hill. So I went and sat there for a while, but I was just like, wow, this is the place where he laid rest, was laid to rest in a sense, before they cremated him. Which was at a different spot where we went to, and there's a stupa there, and that's where it really gets intense. The sadness in the air. You feel it. That sense of, let's not talk about this. Be quiet time. And even those people who come in and wanting money from you, there's a sense of like imposed serenity on them they're just like extremely quiet instead of, pulling on you. I mean, literally at Jetavana, I had a family where the wife, who I presume was the wife, had a baby in her arm, and this was happening at sunrise. The woman jumps off of the bike and she rushes towards me and starts pulling on my shirt so that I can actually give her some money. And she had gold earrings and everything was fine, but that's normal, by the way. So I was like, please, I'm a pilgrim. And because it's very encouraging otherwise. So now that might be the negative side of what I've observed, but I've seen some wonderful, wonderful qualities in people while I was there as well, that just allowed me to really hone in on what this path means to me. And this brings me back to what I was hinting at or mentioning about people in robes that I've seen in some of these places, sitting there. For all intents and purposes, they have the shaved head, they have the robes, and they might have learned a few chants, but their lifestyle, their presence, their demeanor says something else. So that brought up some defilements in me, some sense of resentment, anger, even hatred. Like, how dare you? How dare you sully this sacred ground, pretending to be somebody you're not? And that's something that I had to work with. My own judgmental mindset kicked in. And so it was very juicy. It was very much of a fertilizer for me to work with during the time that I was not just doing the pilgrimage, but all throughout the time that I was in India and Nepal. Because from all sides you are being forced to become aware of your thoughts, of your feelings, of what's really going on, and the choices, obviously, because that's where our intentions come from, which are at the backbone of our actions and our speech. So, how often do we stop and question our feelings? Is something that I will always posit to myself and to anyone that I come across who wants to learn more about the path. And what is behind the feeling is always a thought. Always a thought occurring first. Now the problem is most of the thinking pattern is a pattern thanks to the habitual way of us doing things for many, many lifetimes. Even if you don't believe in rebirth, it really doesn't matter. All you have is this life. Think about it that way. We have a tendency of doing and thinking and habitually processing things in a certain manner, a formulaic structure that we've come up with that oftentimes is quite flawed. But we never pay attention to that. We always look at the feeling aspect of things. This made me feel this way. And it's so quick. But we never pause to consider, okay, what happened prior to the feeling? A thought took place. No matter how minuscule, it is powerful enough to change the outcome of the next moment. What we think now in this moment dictates what we think and feel in the next moment. So that's what I would like to leave you with, because this was pretty much at the core of the experience of a pilgrim in this digital age going through modern day India, which is not, in many ways, not that different from what it was at the time of the Buddha. Shocking. In Rajgir and other places where we went, we were going, I mean, there's a road, yeah, but you're looking out the window and you're seeing scenes from the time of what the Buddha actually, his eyes would have seen. There's no sign of modern age, except when you tilt your head upward and you see a satellite dish on top of a hut that's made of cow dung. Everything else is the same. So, that brings a totally different sense of relevance of the teaching from the time of the Buddha to now. So it's very much alive and very much applicable, whatever we read and hear as Dhamma talks. So I know I'm almost, it's difficult. But there's a lot more stories, obviously, that I would love to share at different times. But thank you for listening. I missed you guys and missed being here. Do you have any questions for me?